could maybe do a bank.
My thing is, like, I think the properties are worth more than everything else.
More than the business?
For sure. I mean, it's 3 commercial properties and 4 rental units.
Are they long-term leases? Do you know?
I mean, one of them is.
Because all that lease is revenue too. So could you go to a bank? You could, or you could find an investor that you'd have to partner with.
Mm-hmm. I've looked at both of those things, and neither of them looked ideal. But you want to pop into this? Like I said, real informal.
Check.
We're both recording. Everything sounds good.
Great.
Ken Fortier. I gotta turn the camera on. It's so much nicer when I have Jackson here to help me.
Is he gonna hear this?
Yeah, I'll send it to him later. Jackson had to go do his day job.
What's Jackson's last name?
Meitner. And then we legitimately have to use this, otherwise it's impossible to sync up.
Okay.
I figured out that's why they use these in movies. I thought
Yeah.
it was like a joke thing.
No.
But it works really, really well. And look at that. How sweet is that?
That's pretty nice.
Right? All right. Ken Fortier.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for coming on, by the way.
Luis, it's my pleasure.
So I guess we should probably introduce you. Ken used to be my boss at one point in time. He's also been a longtime mentor of mine. And he's helped me through a lot of conversations and introduced me to a lot of people, which is one of the things we're probably going to talk about today.
For sure.
What are you doing now? Where are you at right now?
So actually, I just recently co-founded a new business called Nexus Benefit Solutions. It's what it is, kind of in a nutshell, is we provide concierge healthcare services to businesses, and we've got an insurance product that underwrites the cost to the employer.
Got it.
Real simple story. It's actually a big need right now that we're filling because companies spend a lot of money on insurance benefits. They spend a lot of money for their employees to have access, but then the hospitals don't do a really great job in providing that care. So this concierge healthcare kind of complements their benefits and helps these employees have access 24/7 to a dedicated team, a nurse practitioner, and a doctor whenever they need them.
So are all those people, do you have like a facility where these people work, or are they like contracted people to call for the concierge part?
So what we've done is we're partnering with existing concierge practices, like Health Bar is one example.
Got it.
Table Health is another up in Traverse City. And these are 2 businesses that are trying to grow. And now we've found a vehicle, and my business partner, Jason Barrup's the genius behind all this. But we found a way to help them promote their business and sell their product, and then leveraging an insurance product that's been around for years and years to literally underwrite the cost through a tax savings model.
Got it.
Pretty cool.
So is there any money that comes out of pocket for the clients? Like, is it
$0?
Zero? So it's probably pretty easy to sell, isn't it?
It's been remarkably. I'm not going to call it easy because in West Michigan, they always say if an entrepreneur can make it in West Michigan, they can make it anywhere. That's true, but they're looking at this going, why wouldn't I do this? And we're saying, I agree. There's no risk. There's no real contracts to worry about. You just have to do a little legwork communicating what this product is to the employees. And sometimes that's the barrier. Employees don't like change. And even if this is really good change, the hard part is helping these companies communicate what we do effectively to their team.
Do you have a target business type for this?
I would say companies with more than 50 employees is ideal, up to 5,000. But I would say good retention is helpful. If they've got high turnover, this might not be a good solution for them. But really, any business in manufacturing, I would say higher education is good for us right now. Professional services is great. There's a real need. I mean, every business that has employees is struggling to not only keep their employees, but to provide for them and their families through this great job that they have. So this concierge healthcare just is going to add to the culture.
One last question about that.
Yep.
You said that like everything manufacturing to professional services, does it matter if the employees that are being supported in this program are like wage employees or like high pay salary employees? Does it change?
No, it's equal. It's the part-time employees don't earn enough money because they're only part-time employees to participate in this program the way the insurance plan works. But anybody working more than 30 hours a week in really any industry has an opportunity to participate in this.
Awesome.
Good question.
Thank you. I figured listen, I'll ask a bunch of great questions. I don't know if everybody else wants to hear them, but there's stuff that I always want to know.
Excellent.
Do you want to talk a little bit about your book or
Sure.
at least what it means?
Sure. So, I mean, you read it, which I really appreciate.
I've read it a couple times.
Net Plus Connections. Like if there was one idea or one concept in there that you liked best, what would you say that is?
So I guess I can talk about what I liked best, but more I'll talk about like the biggest perspective change that I had going through the book. So one of the things that you open up in the book about is, I mean, shamelessly saying like, hey, listen, everybody has a relational balance sheet. It may be an uncomfortable thought to have, but it is a matter of fact. And in this book outlines a lot of different ways for you to learn about how you can be more of a positive on someone else's specific balance sheet. A lot of the times when you think about like self-improvement and kind of, building relationships and being a better communicator, it's kind of thought of it as like a wide net. Like, oh, if you do these things, everybody's going to love you, right? And in this book, you identify that, every individual person has a different reason for you being a benefit to them or a minus to them. And it sounds super transactional in that situation, but your friends and your family can be that way, or like the charities that you work with. A charity can seem like a net minus because it takes your time, it takes your money, but the output of how it makes you feel makes it a net positive or a net plus.
A net plus. Intrinsic value is
where
you're headed with that. Yeah.
So that kind of overall perspective change has really been what I remember the first time I read it, and now I'm a little bit more mature, I guess, than with that. And it kind of hit home a little bit different, especially like at this point in my life.
It's great to hear that. I mean, the relational balance sheet is something people probably don't think about or even talk about much, but we're doing it whether we want to admit it or not. We're actually sizing up the time, like the time today. You asked me if I'd come out and spend an hour and a half or an hour with you and help you with this business that you're trying to grow and trying to create this awareness about your podcast. And I said, absolutely, right? When and where. And I think that time is valuable. But you've been great with me as a mentee. You've done really well. And what I mean by that is you call me when you need me. You don't, and you listen and you take my advice sometimes.
I am a good listener.
And I'm not saying you have to always take my advice, but I think the main idea is that you are sincerely appreciative of what I give you. So I have mentored others who take up a lot of time and don't necessarily listen or take advantage of this relationship, and I'll hang in there as long as I can, but ultimately they become a net minus in my life, and ultimately I just kind of have to let them go at some point. You see how that could work?
Yeah, 100%. Do you one of the things that you outlined early on in the book, and it helps a lot with the conversation going through it, is the idea of like what is a net plus person and what is a net minus person. And again, hopefully you can explain this, but I want people to understand that this is in relation to you. It's not an inherent trait to them. They're not inherently bad people if they're net minus. It's just how it affects you in this point. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's an awareness.
That's a great way to say it.
It is. It's people don't recognize when they're being net minus. Just the way they were brought up or their background or whatever their story is, they don't believe they're doing any wrong when they stand out in a conference room where there's a meeting of their peers and they just suck all the air out of the room by just stepping on people, interrupting others, voicing their opinion not in the right time or in the right way. And I was hoping the book could just kind of help people recognize when they're being net minus so that maybe they could turn that behavior around and give them an opportunity to be better. Mm-hmm.
Net plus people give you energy, teach you things you don't know. I think those are the two big ones.
Yeah, it is. That's it. Net plus add to your life, right?
It's a plus in your life.
You want to be around them. You want to surround yourself with net plus people. And it's taken me years to get here. I mean, I'm so blessed and grateful for my current network of truly net plus people in my life. And the ones who are net minus are very few. And I actually don't spend a lot of time with the net minus people in my life. And what ends up happening is your life gets fuller. You're happier. You have more peace. You're giving time to people you really care about and you love. I mean, I'm starting my own business again. I mean, this is the third business that I've started. And what's really exciting about it is I'm working when I want, with who I want, and doing the things that are really important in our community. I'm adding to these employers' lives. I'm being net plus for the employees. I'm helping these other businesses that are trying to grow, that are really great at healthcare, and yet they're not really good at sales. They can't promote themselves very well, and they'll admit it. I mean, I was talking with a group today. And that's where I just feel like being Net Plus and just recognizing our value to that and how we can help them has just been a real thrill for me.
Do you think that, well, you'd outlined this a little bit in the book, but could you speak a little bit to the general concept of not so much changing somebody from a net minus to a net plus, but either shifting how you interact with them or maybe figuring out when to cut bait and run. Again, a lot of these things, the really hard part for me was thinking about identifying people in your life that you would consider, oh, this person is possibly a net minus, but in other situations they're a net plus. This person's awesome here, but in this situation, like any of these types of adjacent situations, they're a net minus. Can you kind of talk a little bit about what that looks like, or maybe just
I have a story.
Perspective?
I have a story.
I would love a story.
Let me share a story. So early on, right before the book was published, I was doing some public speaking, preparing people for what was coming in this message. And I remember at the end of the meeting, a gentleman came up to me, and he's in finance, and he asked me this question. He says, Ken, he said, I'm really struggling with, identifying how to separate these net plus and net minus people in my life. He goes, let me give you an example. I said, tell me your example. He says, well, there's a gentleman that I've referred 3 business deals to, 3 opportunities to, and he hasn't given me anything in return. I said, well, okay. He goes, I think this guy's net minus in my life. I said, well, now let me ask you a question. He says, okay. I said, so did those referrals get taken care of? He said, yes. I go, did he do a good job taking care of those 3 connections that you made for him? He said, yes, they did a good job and they're all happy. I said, well, isn't that enough? Isn't that enough? Can't he be maybe a net minus? Are you looking for business from him? Yes, I'm looking for business from him. I said, and yet, every time you refer an opportunity to him, he takes great care of them. So to me, that individual is a net plus. And if I were you, I would stay close to that individual because who knows what future can bring. And he goes, right after he says, you know what? I'm going to buy your book. Is what he said.
Right. And a big part of that is learning that, first of all, if someone makes an introduction for you, you should follow through on that.
Yeah.
Right. But also realizing that somebody may not be a net plus specifically for you in that situation, but what they can do for the people around you can create a lot of value overall.
So it's really hard to distinguish those two. I mean, I've got individuals who have been really net minus in my life and taken a lot more than they've given. And this is recent events. And this guy just not a great connection. And now in today's world where we are in my life and how we've matured a little bit, now this person's made a huge impact on my life. So, it's hard to describe what can happen in your life, whether you're net plus or net minus, or if you have to stay in that space or not. It's really about growing up and getting mature and being open to hearing when you're not being a good person.
When you're not doing the thing.
Yeah. I used to give you some tough love.
Oh,
remember?
Ruthless. You and Joshua, ruthless.
Well, because I saw so much potential in you and you were so passionate about everything that you do. I'm thinking, this guy, I want to help him. And the ones I don't help is the ones that I don't believe have any hope.
They don't have an edge to them.
No, it's like, why am I going to talk to them? This person's not going to listen to me. I've tried. I give up. But you embrace that. And I think that's special. That's pretty important.
One of the things you briefly, first of all, thank you, by the way. One of the things that you briefly highlighted a second ago was kind of like the concept of, you brushed on the concept of being a gateway, right? And one of the things I think that's really, I don't know so much if it's changed with my generation, but at least I see it with my parents and my grandparents and their circles. It's different than the people in my age, is that there is much more of a proactive decision to want to be a gateway to other people versus sometimes my generation may be more protective of their relationships. They end up being gatekeepers of relationships or contacts or people that they have that may be in the know for anything.
Yeah. It's really hard for me to obviously connect to those individuals that when you say gatekeeper, so I used to work with someone, just no names here obviously, but I used to work with someone who had the ability to make a lot of connections for me in my telecom business when I owned Quantum Leap Communications. And I loved him as a brother, and I would pay him for services, and he did a great job for me, but he would not introduce me. And I said, why? And he goes, because I'm protecting my customers. I go, protecting them from what? Or from who? Why wouldn't you make an introduction for me? And it wore on me. It just wore on me. So I met one of his competitors, and his competitor was open, Ken, I will introduce you to anyone you want to meet, but I really want to work with you. And I thought to myself, you know what? I want to do business with you because you're not this, and I don't even call it a gatekeeper. It's like the key master. I've got the key and I'm not letting you in, but I'll work for you. But I don't trust you enough to introduce you to someone in my network. And I just found that to be really hard, really difficult. And it was sad for me when I had to let them go. We're still on great terms. I just feel like when you're a gatekeeper, you're missing out on an opportunity to help someone in your network with meeting someone new. I think that's a problem.
On the other side of that too is if you see enough value in somebody that you feel the need to gatekeep your relationship with them, you are hurting the value that you see in them by not making that.
You're being
connection with them.
selfish.
Exactly. It's for both sides of it. If you, let's say there's some bigwig somewhere that you have a good relationship with, and you can help somebody that you know make that connection, whether business, pleasure, golf, or whatever it might be, and you don't. You're being rude to the contact that you're trying to protect if they can create value for them.
And people may have had one bad experience years ago where they made an introduction for somebody and it went bad and it hurt the relationship. And they never forget that pain, so they never want to do it again. And what I say is, there's a right way and a wrong way to make an introduction. Truly. I don't think you're making an introduction when you connect people in an email or in a LinkedIn connection. Hey, you should know this person. And then you just go from here, right? I think there's a right way and a wrong way, and I think you know this. We've talked about this.
Yeah, every once in a while, it's okay to do a quick email, though.
Of course. I mean, if you're busy, but if this is really an important connection.
Yeah, especially that.
If this important, aren't all connections important?
This is true.
I mean, I know that people like to take shortcuts, and maybe the Z Gen and even X Gen, even in my generation, we just like to hurry up and get something done and move on. But if I'm going to take the time to introduce you to someone, I will always be there for that meeting. Always. If I can't be there in the meeting in person, we're going to do it virtually, but I will always be participating in that first connection.
And I think that that's a huge part of it. Like an introduction is not so much like you're not passing off responsibility. You are, if it's a hub and spoke, you're making more spokes. You're invested in the relationship. And also, like, if you're there, you can kind of craft why this relationship's important to introduce. Like, why you guys should know each other. Maybe it is, they were like, oh, I'm a grocery store and I sell milk, but what about these other things that you guys do? There's other reasons you guys should be connected.
For sure. And I'm really truly trying to help. That's why I do this. I mean, I like to build bridges, not burn them, right? I like to build bridges. People will compliment me, Ken, you're such a great networker, you're such a great connector. Well, that's just because I take the time. I mean, and you can all too. Anyone can do this. When you're going to make an introduction for someone and you really believe it's a good opportunity for two people to meet, be there. Be part of that experience. And they'll never forget you for it, number one. And if something good comes from it, that's fantastic. And even if they just make their introductions and nothing comes from it, at least they got to meet each other and you were there to see it. Mm-hmm. It's hard. It's really hard. And it takes time. But I feel it's super valuable.
I genuinely, a lot of people, the term networking nowadays has kind of been corrupted. Sometimes you'll hear somebody be like, oh, I went to a networking event and all it was, it's basically financial advisors and insurance salesmen, right?
Nothing against financial
advisors. Or insurance salesmen, to be honest. But like those, like that's kind of what people see a lot of, is they get really concerned, like, I don't want to go buy stuff. And then on the other side of it is, if you're a business owner or some executive or somebody that if you're somebody that's going to get sold to, you don't want to go to those places because every relationship does become transactional. It doesn't become like building a larger circle. Like, at least not as many people are thinking about having a guy, putting more people in their pocket, putting more people in their backpack, and kind of expanding their reach, like you were saying.
It's true. It's a problem. You can't control what's happening in the groups, even when you, like these organizations in town that host some of these meetings, you can't control what happens. They're so big, some of these. Econ Club's amazing. I always go. ACG, I'm very active in ACG. These groups are really good in West Michigan, and you kind of know what you're getting. You got a great speaker, you got a great group. ACG has a lot of professional services individuals, not a lot of business owners necessarily, but they are part of the group. They just don't necessarily come to all the meetings. Because of that reason, there's so many professionals. There's bankers and insurance agents and attorneys in the room. I think what I'm hoping people will take away, not just from the book, but just from our message today, is that there is a better way to network if you're willing to be curious, be authentic, and approach networking in a different way.
On that note, I know that we can talk about a lot of ideas and frameworks, but one of the things that you taught me that we did for a really long time, and the pandemic kind of killed it, which really I should get back going, was the concept of the circle of influence meetings. You know, having a cocktail event where everybody brings somebody that they would like to meet. And I have met legitimately one of my best friends I met on one of those things. I know some people that got hired at it, and we were just kind of flying by the seat of our pants. We were young professionals. We didn't have that much formal experience in it. Is there, first, if you want to talk about that, you're welcome to, but are there other frameworks like that, other ideas that maybe younger generations or even the older generations should probably try again?
I think that it's up to the individual. If they really want to have a better experience, that they have to do their own. Set up their own monthly lunch. Set up their own monthly breakfast. Whatever, coffee. And invite individuals who are like-minded, like you, and invite them to be in that circle or center of influence. You know, when I was working at my last gig, it's an insurance company in town, my role as VP of Business Development was to not only go out and bring in new business, but was to coach the sales team how to develop their own centers of influence groups. And it was surprising to me that some of the younger team at first weren't sure about it, didn't feel like they had the network, but when they started doing the work, it actually ended up developing into something that really paid off for them. They're still in sales. You still got to make money, right? Mm-hmm. But why not do business with people that you know, like, and trust, that are your friends, and do business with those that are like-minded, that also want to make connections and don't want to be that person at the meeting that's always trying to sell something, but they're there to really try to help someone else. And that has a lot to do with the format of these meetings as well. So I've got a whole structure on how a network meeting should work. And I'm thinking like 10 to 15 people max in this room. It could be smaller, but I think the idea of just owning that is really the best way to create a better center of influence group, and just taking that effort and making that list and reaching out to your connections.
It is insane. Insane is like the least professional term. It's so dope, dude. That is one of the things that Ken tried so hard to beat out of me, was dope and dude.
Yep.
And professional
Just lose
meetings,
the word. Just lose the
word. Dude.
It's still here, though. It's still thriving.
It's not as bad as it used to be. I've met a lot of people through those circle of influence things. You know, my real estate attorney that we're working with, he is a contact from somebody that got brought to that meeting for me. That they're like, hey, you should meet this guy. And he's like, oh, I can't help you, but this person should help you. You never know, like, where the next door will be. Do you think that there is something missing from, like, the values of the younger generation about building their Rolodex, or do you think it's just like the atmosphere that they've been raised into?
Well, that's the thing. I don't think that they're bad people. I think they just don't know, and they don't really have the mentoring and the leaders, especially when COVID was going on. A lot of these young professionals that were coming into the workplace were coming into empty offices or working from home, so they lost a lot of time. And now that we're back at it, I think a lot of these industries are working harder than ever, and I'm saying they, meaning the seasoned professionals, are working harder than ever to get their deals, and really don't have time to be bringing up this younger gen, and they just got to figure it out. And for that reason, I think there's dysfunction in some of these young professionals. I think there's a hunger that they have. It's a problem that's not being solved, and there's a real opportunity, I think, to scale up. And I think when you scale up a mentoring program, or even in your workplace, have a mentoring program where you can help these young individuals, try to teach them to be functional, authentic, curious people, that you're going to make the community better, the workplace culture is going to be better, everything gets better when you coach up individuals that are really trying hard to make a living, to do well, and not be a net minus person, right? I just feel that we just, as a community, I think we have a real opportunity to help young people, and through mentoring. I know that I sit as a chair for Davenport on the Davenport Alumni Board, and every year at commencement, I get the final word kind of things. I'm welcoming this student body into the Davenport family. And for the last 2 years, I always make this offer: if anyone needs a mentor, to reach out to me. You know, there's somewhere around 800 students out in the audience. And Dr. Pappas will say, like, wow, that's a pretty big offer that you're doing that. And I said, well, yeah, I think we can do that. And he says, that's pretty special. So the first year I did it, I had no one call me.
It's a little deflating.
The second year I had one person call me. And this gentleman, young man, drove over from Detroit. I met with him once, and then we had several phone calls. And I helped him get introduced into 3 different businesses in IT. Within 2 months, he had a job, his dream job, where he wanted to go. So that mentoring helped. And he was such a good young man, and he's just hungry. He just didn't know. He didn't know how to interview really well, and he would tell you this. And I think being experienced and being around and giving someone a kind of that hand up is really something that we have a responsibility to do. And I'm obviously, you can tell I'm a strong believer in that.
Oh, it's exciting when you hear somebody complaining about having a need or trying to fix something. Even like so much as like, have you ever had somebody who's like, I need a plumber, and you're like, oh, I got a guy, he's so good, and they're like, oh, thanks for the recommendation on the plumber. It's a similar thing in the professional world, and it's just a longer tail relationship sometimes.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's specific, I don't want to say professions, but sometimes this like concept of networking comes off as like very like suit and tie, very like lawyers and executives, like going and knocking on doors. Is there a conversation or a way to talk about this for like young professionals, like design, like creative designers, people that are like, I don't need to talk to anybody? Do you have anything to say to that, or things that they should think about?
Well, number one, you got to have a desire.
This is true.
And sometimes the creatives tend to be more introverted and not feel like they need to be out networking. So you have to have a desire, a need. And so first, and if you do, and it's really up to you to reach out, and not just in books help. The Little Black Book of Connections by Jeffrey Gitomer, really great book.
Little Red Book of Selling.
Little Red Book of Selling did as well, but that Little Black Book of Connections actually inspired me to write this book. And I was like, wow, this made so much sense to me. How to build bridges and how to scale this just connected my brain perfectly. Most people don't really just naturally connect. They don't just naturally think the way you do and the way I do. Mm-hmm. So it takes work. I used to have a small group training program that after I was divorced in 2014, and then I couldn't help myself, let alone these small groups. So I took a little sabbatical from that. But my focus in that small group training was just to help people learn how to do this and what's the best way to do it, and give them some tools and some ideas that can help them get through these difficult networking times. I even established a business networking. What was it called? Net Plus Business Networking. No, Watermark Business Connections, it was called.
Because you're a member at Walmart?
And I was a member at Watermark. So and we did that, and I was like 2013 through 2015. And the idea there was you could come into a space, and the goal in this networking group was to help one person. You weren't there to sell. There were business owners there. There were salespeople there. But your whole goal was just to help one person in the room. And if you did that, success. So even those that are the most introverted could actually accomplish that goal. And the extroverts would try to overachieve that goal.
Of course.
So if you think about it, we were doing so much good. And that group grew really fast. But I think you got to have a desire to answer your question. And if you do want to do that, you're obviously welcome to reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to you. And if I'm not a good mentor for you, I will find one for you. If you're listening right now, I just feel like it's something our community really needs.
So I got a couple of quick last questions here. The term, we talked about this a little bit at the beginning. There's the term networking, small talk, building relationships. And I kind of see the building relationships as the goal, right? And when you're like my grandfather always used to say, cultivate, 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 right? Every time you see somebody go say hello to them, shake their hand, let them know if you're not up here and you're disappearing, right? And that part seems very like gamey, and people don't really get along to that part. And then it kind of like trickles down to, oh, well, I hate small talk. And it doesn't have to be small talk, right? So is there a starting perspective? Like if you're going out to dinner, if you're not a sales guy and the sales guys drag you to a conference, is there any piece of advice to give to people about like, hey, don't think about it like small talk or networking? Is there anything like around that you can talk about?
And there's lots of books that have lots of different ways to think about that, but have a plan. When I'm going to go to this event, I don't want to go, but I'm going to have a plan to, meet one person. Maybe you can look ahead and see who's going to be there, and you want to take the time to go search for that person, and even that journey of trying to find that person could help you meet someone else, right? So have a plan, and then I would say be yourself, be authentic, and be curious. I think we kind of forget that people like for us to be interested in them. And if
be
you're
interested, not interesting.
There you go. Be interested. So have some questions in your back pocket that you can pull out and just ask about the other person before you what I say is vomit all over them with everything you're doing, and they probably
I've never done that.
They don't care, right? But if you take interest in them first, if you try to help them first, then it's a lot easier for them to turn that around and say, I really appreciate you being interested in me, and I really appreciate you being, truly interested in what I'm trying to accomplish. Why don't you share what you're trying to accomplish? So, to be this quick answer, but I think you got to have a plan first of what you're going to achieve when you go to this event, because you can't just sit around and drink and hang out with the same people or eat your appetizers or hors d'oeuvres, or you can seek out that new connection, that new relationship, that new bridge that you can build.
I mean, that's a pretty good way to land it. I feel like I don't have anything to end it better than that. Is there anything that you would like to plug or anything you want to get on camera?
But I mean, to plug something feels, I don't know, it just feels so selfish.
No, I mean, I not plug it, but I have the ability to
I know, right?
cut it up for you to use for something. So
I gotta think about it. Can I get a rain check on that?
Yeah, for sure. Listen, I put this up every once in a while. Listen, I'm going to tap on you to introduce me to people for this podcast anyway, so it's the least I can do. All right, well, listen, I really do appreciate it. I legitimately, I'm glad you came on. I knew when I reached out to you that you would come do this. Not only because of, our relationship, but also I felt it was really easy to, kind of encompass, hey, coming out of your comfort zone and having conversations, and kind of what we're trying to do here.
Well, I got to tell you, I got to thank my family, too. I mean, my wife, Diana, and Eliana and Ash are my kids. I got twin 11-year-olds at home. They are my motivation. They are my purpose. They're everything to me, too. So
that's one of the things you said in the book, by the way. Not just about your family. It's but that was the biggest. I don't want to keep rambling, but one of the biggest moments in the book to kind of figure everything out. It's things that seem like net minuses can turn into net positives. Your family takes a lot of your time and your money, but they offer a lot more.
Oh yeah, for sure, absolutely. Thank you, Luis.
Rock and roll, man. Thanks a bunch. What up? It's Luis from the future. Thank you, everybody, for making it through this one. Let me know what you guys think. Big thank you, huge thank you, shout out to Ken Fortier for being a huge part of my life and for coming out on the podcast. Check out his book, Net Plus Connections. I don't know where it's for sale. Text him, Google his name, you'll find his number somewhere, I'm sure. Thank you to everybody that's been helping me with the podcast. Jackson Meitner, the one who was not here today, that we were talking shit about earlier. Thank you to Lauren Froman, she's been helping me with the social media side of it. And Hans Burdige, he's my cousin that wrote this song, actually, that you're hearing right now. And then Jordan Zimmerman, he's the guy that designed all the logo and branding for the podcast. So thanks to everybody that's been supporting us, and tell your friends. Tell your friends that I have a podcast, and tell them to listen to it and to let me know what they think.